The following presentation by Monument Capital Management, LLC is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the presentation serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from Monument or any other investment professional of your choosing. Please see additional information disclosure at the end of this presentation. A copy of Monument's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request or at www.monumentwealthmanagement.com.
Give unrestricted funding. So
Yes.
what is unrestricted funding?
Can you say that one more time, please?
Give unrestricted funding.
Yes, thank you.
For all the development officers
Yes.
out there, give unrestricted. So I want to just decode that jargon for a minute because that stuff
Right,
really
'cause I didn't know what that term
Yeah.
meant until I knew what it meant. Welcome back to the Off the Wall podcast, a podcast where we talk about all the stuff that Wall Street is not talking about, well, for the most part anyway. And I'm Dave Armstrong. I'm the CEO of Monument Wealth Management, and I'm joined today by Jessica Gibbs.
Hi, Dave.
My former co-host.
Former co-host. We're back again.
We are back again.
Yeah.
I think this is very exciting. You're a guest now, though.
I am a guest, yes. For those of you who are longtime Off the Wall listeners and have been wondering where I've been on my new podcast that I'm co-hosting with Emily Harper at Monument Wealth Management. It's called Between Sips. It's all about the conversations that happen when you're sitting down with a cup of coffee or tea and you're making the space to ask, what now about our wealth and the topics and the questions that come up. It stems from a lot of conversations that we have with clients as financial planners and want to share that with a new audience. So yeah, encourage everyone, if you haven't been listening to Between Sips, to check that out.
Yes, it's interesting to see how far we've come with content at Monument, because I just listened to the episode yesterday when I was driving and hearing it live, it was the first time I heard it. And so it's kind of interesting that we're doing this content and it's just materializing, and it was so fantastic. I loved it. It was really great. It made me think a lot about too, because I had just gotten back from vacation also overseas. And
this was for those who don't know, this is our very first episode. I think Dave went back into the archives and listened to this, I'm assuming. And this is all about moving abroad. And I guess when you're living, if you go vacation abroad, your mind starts to wonder, like, I could live here. Right?
Yeah. I got on Zillow to see how much it costs to buy a house on an island in Croatia.
Sure.
It's a lot, and decided it wasn't a great idea. And then I listened to your podcast and it affirmed all my things. But that's not what we're talking today.
No, as fun as that is.
Right.
No.
We're talking about charitable giving trends. So not only are you the chief of staff here at Monument and a partner at Monument, but you're also the resident expert in charitable giving. And you have a lot of previous experience from the Brookings Institution job that you had before Monument, when you upgraded your jobs to come to Monument. and so you've got a lot of really great experience about that. And so we're going to talk about that today. And why don't you give us a little bit of background on your charitable giving real quick, and then we'll get into the questions.
Yeah, I think it's something where it's just a personal interest area of mine. Financial planning is a really broad field, and as much as I love talking about all sorts of different topics, charitable giving is one that I just personally gravitate to because, as you said, I used to work at a nonprofit and saw philanthropy from the organization side. Yeah. And, the organization's goals and trying to connect with donors who share a similar vision, trying to kind of align on what the donors are hoping to accomplish as well as what the organization is. And so 5 years at Brookings, kind of seeing things from the organization side, and now, over 10 years at Monument working with our clients on giving from the individual donor perspective. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to meld those two worlds. I often see silos, right, between conversations around donors. This is what the donor needs. And then there's a whole conversation that's happening in silos around the nonprofit world and fundraising, and this is what the institutions need. And not so often, I feel like, are those two worlds brought together. So I thought it would be really interesting today to talk about charitable giving trends that I'm sort of learning about that are happening, in the institution space, and really bring that over to, like, what does that mean for you as the donor? What should you be thinking about as you do your charitable giving plan for the end of the year or for the coming year? It's a very interesting time, I think, in philanthropy. There's a lot of things that have happened, in the current environment that are changing the way institutions respond, their needs, kind of almost, you can see parallels to almost like COVID times when organizations really needed to quick fill a lot of needs, quickly pivot, and relied on donors heavily to be able to do those things.
Yeah, because really so for background for listeners, I'm on a couple of boards of charitable organizations. I'm on the board of directors of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation, which is the Marine Corps Museum down right off of 95 in Quantico, Virginia. If you haven't been there, quick plug for that. It's the most amazing. It's like on par with, the Holocaust Museum, things like that. I mean, it is a $350 million facility. And we have the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation raises money for upkeep and expansion and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also on the board of the Station Foundation, which is a veterans organization that does transition help for members of the special operations community coming out of the military and how they transition out of a career, which essentially 20 years of sustained combat, and how they transition into new careers in the civilian world. And those two boards I'm on, and so I'm very in touch with fundraising and things like that. And I get the sense that just fundraising is down a little bit. I think a lot of that has to do with the environment in the first half of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely affects local charities and nonprofits. In the nonprofit world, revenue is basically donations for the most part.
Right.
I mean, that's, in a business, you generate revenue by selling things. And in the nonprofit world, they generate revenue by people donating money.
Correct.
So if that's down, it can really impact some of the things that they're doing with those nonprofits and charitable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a general trend in the past year of basically nonprofits are facing a lot of new pressures. So, I mean, growing needs for programs and services, rising costs, government actions like changes in federal funding,
Mm-hmm.
economic uncertainty, just general unpredictable times. I think it's creating a lot of financial stress, as you said, particularly for these small local nonprofits. I think all of us, when we think of philanthropy, tend to think of like those really big names that's have a big budget and so can spend a lot of money on advertising, right? That's how you know these big nonprofits' names. But I love this stat from the National Council on Nonprofits that 88% of nonprofits have an annual budget of less than $500,000. That means the majority of nonprofits in this country are really small nonprofits that are doing really incredible work in the local community. But they are really significantly impacted by changes to, grant programs maybe that they were recipients of in the past, or they have more people within the community that they need to serve. So, I mean, this was to the point where earlier this year I was having a conversation with a philanthropy expert, local to the DC area. And she, in her opinion, she felt like many of these small local nonprofits were at risk of having to close by the end of this year.
Oh, wow.
That was kind of her perspective from the beginning earlier this year. So I think that this is a time where the organizations, particularly in your local community, really need your support if you are inclined to do charitable giving.
Right. I'm curious, what sort of data have you seen on this?
So I think there is one particular study that I really like from an organization that I kind of keep tabs on. It's called the Center for Effective Philanthropy. They do an annual State of Nonprofits report. So I thought it was very interesting to look at their 2025 report because they surveyed, almost 600 nonprofit organizations. And through this sort of questionnaire interview style, they're able to collect a lot of data and identify three major trends that are happening within the industry. And again, this is, I think, important for donors to know. So I want to make sure I'm connecting each of these to what donors should be thinking about or doing in response. But so the first trend that they identified is that the increasingly polarized and unpredictable political environment, it poses a risk to funding and the communities that they support.
Mm-hmm.
So my mind goes to this is a huge ROI opportunity for donors.
Okay.
If we're thinking about it in terms of a business, you mentioned a business earlier,
Mm-hmm.
right? Philanthropy is not going to fill the gaps made by a loss of government funding and grant programs. But I also feel like you can't do nothing either.
Right.
So, community foundations, are a really interesting vehicle. I know you're a member of the Community Foundation of Northern Virginia.
Oops, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, he's also a board member.
Right, I was
There's
like
too
on the
many.
spot. I was on the spot with going live on the pod.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Love CF Nova. But the idea of a community foundation is that they can be that filter between people can donate, and you correct me if I'm wrong, people can donate to the community foundation, and the community foundation is in charge of kind of looking at those small organizations within the community and doling out grant money to them.
That's correct.
So I think I was listening to the head of a community foundation in the Midwest earlier. She was kind of talking about trends that she was seeing, other, directors of community foundations that she was connected with. And one of the things she highlighted is that community foundations are doing more emergency grants to programs that have lost funding. And she also highlighted that there is this shifting focus among community foundations from how much assets that they have,
right.
like we've got this much in our bank account, to give out, to talking about this is how much money we're granting out. So they're shifting that focus to, again, like ROI, meeting the moment, having impact. We're supporting these organizations that potentially lost other funding sources.
Right.
And then I think, I look at this too in terms of like the environment in which nonprofits are working is changing so rapidly that if you're a donor, I think this doesn't sound fun, but I would encourage you to do your homework, particularly just to understand the issues in the nonprofits landscapes, the organizations that you care about, what are the issues that they're facing and the needs of their constituents. Because I think impactful donors, they learn about the root causes of the issues that they care about,
right,
and the challenges that the change makers are facing. And then they also can, from there, think more about what they can bring to the table to help solve those problems.
Mm-hmm.
So read the annual report from the organization. You're probably the organization that you're supporting should be putting out an annual report every year. If they're not, maybe that's a question you should ask leadership. And then I think if you want to dive deeper, I want to make sure everyone's aware, like you can review a nonprofit organization's financials. They're publicly available on the Form 990. You can even look at historic filings. They're publicly available on the IRS website. We can link to it in the show notes. But it's an interesting way where you can sort of see, to your point about like what is the revenue that they're bringing in, what are their expenses, and take a look at like how is that adjusting for them, in this year and in the year to come. So the second trend that the study identified was that staffing remains a major issue for nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was interesting. Nearly 2/3 reported struggles filling open positions, and over half cited insufficient funds to hire, retain, and support their workforce.
Right.
So again, what does this mean for you, the donor? Give unrestricted funding. So what is unrestricted funding?
Can you say that one more time, please?
Give unrestricted funding.
Yes, thank you.
For all the development officers out there, give unrestricted. So I want to just decode that jargon for a minute because that's definitely
right, I didn't know what that term meant until I knew what it meant. Yeah,
that's an inside nonprofit speak. But unrestricted funding is, think of it like general operating funding. It's money that isn't tied to a specific purpose versus restricted funding, which is meant for, I gave this money to support a specific program, initiative, scholarship, whatever defined purpose that is.
Right.
So I get the appeal for a donor. And I saw this when I worked in nonprofits of wanting to give restricted money. You want to give to support something that's going to have a direct impact of my money, right?
And kind of have the ability to have a long-lasting say in what happens to the money, even after you've given up total control of it and donated it, right?
Sure.
It's sort of a control, feel-good thing.
You have your goals as a donor, your interest areas. You want to do something you want to give money that supports and aligns with that.
Right.
So, but having flexible, unrestricted money is going to allow an organization to pivot quickly to things like their core operations, which includes salaries, right? We're talking about staffing, includes infrastructure, And also be able to pivot in terms of having funds for innovation and impact on new issues as they arise.
Right.
As I said earlier, I mean, nonprofits now, many of them are having the same needs as they did during COVID, and they need that flexibility to meet the moment and to run their organization. Like just like hypothetically, right? If it's like they have a lot of money potentially in restricted dollars, it's supporting current programs, but all of a sudden they've got a huge increase in need or there's a new need, those organizations are going to have to go out and fundraise new dollars in order to meet that new need or to pivot or to hire another staff member or whatever it is, potentially. And so I think that's a real challenge for nonprofits because you got to find new donors, you got to tap into your existing donor network. So I think you're going to see a trend amongst nonprofits of them doing more unrestricted fundraising going forward. So I think that's important for donors to be aware of is that you may get your annual solicitation letter or you may be talking with a development officer and they're going to be talking to you probably about giving unrestricted dollars.
Right.
So the third major trend that the study identified is that burnout remains a top concern.
Sure.
58% of the survey respondents reported that burnout is moderately or significantly impacting their staff. So again, what does this mean for you, the donor? Be aware that project-based gifts for new initiatives or things like that, like they may increase the demand on staff and resources. We were just talking about that. But I also see a real opportunity, particularly for people who are maybe on a donor council or on the board of the nonprofit, is celebrate victories. I don't think people in general spend enough time acknowledging the wins, right?
Yeah.
You're always kind of like on to the next thing. And in nonprofits in particular, there's this like daily grind attitude of like there is always a challenge to work on solving.
There's always a need for the money.
So I think when you, as kind of a donor, a member of the board, you know, whatever leadership you hold within the organization, like when you stop to celebrate that wins, you're helping to break the daily grind and helping to like focus on like, yes, this is the mission, the vision, and we're accomplishing it.
Right.
And I think you're also contributing to donor morale. I think there's a lot to be said for like, if donors have morale, like you're building positive momentum, other donors are going to feel positive momentum. They're going to keep giving too. They might talk to their friends and, you know, who have a similar interest and bring them involved. Like there is a lot of momentum that can happen when you can see the positivity and you see the impact of what the organization is doing.
Right. And I'll just take a quick second to highlight what you just said through the Community Foundation, CF Nova Community Foundation for Northern Virginia that I'm on the board of, and I'll use them as an example. But when you talk about donor ROI, right, I think about that in terms of if a donor is giving money to the Community Foundation for Northern Virginia, I'm just going to call it CF Nova from here on out. If they give it to CF Nova, they want to see, you know, what is the impact of that money? Well, there is so much impact that takes place in our community that people don't even realize. I'll just use a quick example of the census that just took place a couple years ago. I mean, when you have a community that has a lot of immigrants in it who are scared to actually fill out the census form, you report that there are less people in your community than there actually are. That impacts how much money you get to the community, and that money isn't enough to actually cover the community because they look underrepresented,
right?
Which they are. So it's a population count, and so we did a lot of work on that to make sure that we were getting the money in the community, and so that is one ROI. But you know, another ROI that you talked on, touching on the burnout and people and staff, is that when you're a business owner and you think about investing money from an ROI perspective, you want to take X dollars and spend it on something / invest so that the outcome down the road is 4 times the, I'm making 4 times the amount of the investment. Like you're making the investment to have something on the back end. And when you're donating money to Community Foundation for Northern Virginia or any nonprofit, you're hoping that that investment yields more revenue coming in by the way of more donors. So one way to look at ROI is when you give those unrestricted funds to a nonprofit, they're able to go out and use that for salaries, because if they can hire better people to go out and do the development, those people,
it all builds on
go
itself.
out, right? So it all builds on itself. So that's one way to think of ROI and why the unrestricted giving is so important, because I saw an example where somebody gave a restricted gift, and that's great. It made everybody feel good. There was money that came. We could report that we got the money, but it was constrained by saying every year I want to give a $50,000. I'm just going to, without disclosing, a scholarship. Let's just say something like that. Okay, so over 10 years, that unrestricted gift has grown so much, but they're only allowed to do $50,000 a year. It's like a huge mistake on the gifting part. So like those restricted gifts can really have second order effects that really constrain. Whereas if it was an unrestricted gift, it could be used very easily to hire more people or make more community, or make more investment back into the community. But that brings me to my next question, which is, what we're talking about, the revenue side of this. Talk to me about the finances. What challenges are charitable organizations facing right now with their finances?
Yeah, I thought this was a particularly interesting part of the Center for Effective Philanthropy's 2025 report, because it was interesting because they found that like most nonprofits that they surveyed have stable finances in the near term. That's great. That's what you want to hear. But there were concerns that were raised in the survey about long-term financial sustainability. More than half of the nonprofit leaders in the report said that their organization had at least 6 months of operating expenses. Okay, great. However, the majority predicted that their organizational costs are going to increase, but that they did not anticipate an increase in revenue. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to go further into the data. I'd like to quote the data.
You are allowed.
Okay. Stick with me.
Right. If you were a host, you could have just done it, but now that you're a guest.
Yeah. I mean, so there is a bottom line to this, but I think that this particular piece of data, I thought this was very interesting. So to deal with these financial concerns, the respondents to the survey, let's see, 93% of them said they would be pursuing funding from new donors, and 86% that said they'd be engaging with existing donors. Okay, that makes sense, right? 56% said they would make staffing related adjustments. So that could be reducing staff positions, pausing benefits or compensation, postponing increases to 56%. Compensation, 56%.
Wow.
Yeah, postponing hiring, things like that.
Yeah.
51% said that they would use reserves or endowment funds. And 39% said they would reduce programming or services.
So 40%.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So what this means to me is more organizations were looking at cutting staff than reducing services. This means to me nonprofits are trying to do the same with less.
Right.
So again, what does this mean for a donor?
The donor, right.
Right. Consider that unrestricted but multi-year gift. That's going to allow a nonprofit to better manage their challenges and plan for the long term. So what I mean by an unrestricted multi-year gift is if you've been involved with an organization for a long time, you've been giving to them, annual gifts, you've gotten to understand the work that they're doing, the impact that they're having in the community. You trust the leadership and the direction, of the organization. I think that's when you can start thinking about, okay, I'm going to do a multi-year pledge where I'm going to pledge a certain dollar amount to be paid out over the course of several years. So like hypothetically, let's just, to make the math easy, I'm going to pledge $500,000 to be paid out $100,000 a year over 5 years.
Right.
That multi-year gift is going to do so much to allow the nonprofit to project out, this is how much revenue we have coming in to meet, certain expenses. They're going to be able to do financial modeling in a much more confident way than versus they're on the hamster cycle every year of, we got to raise the money this year. We got to raise the money this year. We don't know for sure if the donors are going to keep giving at the same level.
Right.
So nonprofits are placing that increasing value on donors being invested for the longer term because it creates a sustainability model for them. And then I think, nonprofits, some of them may be backing away from federal funding in the future. Maybe that would have been a component of their revenue in the past, and maybe they are less confident in the ability for that to be there, so they're going to back away from that. You may need to fill that deficit for your favorite organizations. I think it's just something to be aware of. And again, you can look at a 990 and understand better about their sources of funding and how much came from, grants that they received versus individual donors. So I think, there was a lot of talk earlier this year about Harvard, for example, and, loss in government funding, but Harvard has a massive endowment. Why can't they just use the endowment to cover these needs? And I think it's important for donors to be aware that, endowment funds are typically restricted heavily to a specific purpose that the donor originally had when they made the gift,
right.
And that there's only a specific draw that you can take a certain percentage from the endowment fund each year in order to make sure the endowment is self-sustaining over the long term. That's the point of endowment gifts. So even if your organization has a large endowment, I don't think you can necessarily plan for, okay, that's going to be the way that they fill the gap in terms of operational expenses and new initiatives.
Right.
So just more things for, I think, donors to be thinking about. And that's where, as someone who works with people who give money to charity, I think the most effective way to do it is to just be really clear on your personal charitable goals and be more narrow, I guess,
right.
Rather than donating a little bit to a lot of organizations, to just maybe kind of connect more with the organizations where you feel like you trust the leadership, you see the impact, because you should be giving money and seeing impact. That shouldn't be swept aside. Impact
That's
is
your
important.
ROI.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So I think, think about donating more to less organizations, I guess, is maybe what I'm trying to say. And
Sure.
doing it in this more thoughtful, strategic way, because that's really going to make sure that the nonprofit is on solid footing for the years to come.
Right. Now, because you have co-hosted Off the Wall with me so much in the past, that I'm kind of famous for going off on a little bit of tangent. I'm going to come back, I promise.
Okay.
But one of the reasons why we're talking to people, to listeners, about donating is because if you go back and listen to our milestone 75th episode, Emily Harper and I talk a lot about the where money can go. And to recap, money can go one of four places, right? You can spend it in your lifetime, and then to the extent that there's a dollar left at either when you die or your spouse dies, it can go to friends and family, charity, or sometimes taxes, depending on the size of your estate. So we talk about donating because it is such a huge component to people's plans, but it tends to be after death. So it can sometimes be swept aside, but we like to bring focus back into it because it is such a huge component of someone's financial plan and their legacy gifts. So with that, if you were to come to me, Dave Armstrong, and say, who should I donate money to? I'm going to say the Marine Corps Museum, CF Nova, the Station Foundation, right?
Right, but because you have the personal connection to those things. If you asked me, I'd say a very different answer.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Mm-hmm. So while you and I and everyone here at Monument are great for, planning the donating part, we have seen some recent success with clients who have gone out and hired an actual philanthropic advisor. And we have seen some really great success with that and heard some really great feedback from that. I'm wondering if you could take a second to talk about that, because even while people may not be thinking about it, it is a huge component to somebody's legacy left over of their estate.
Yeah, I think philanthropy advisors, first off, they exist. There are people that are just very plugged into the nonprofit world and can help be that bridge between your charitable goals and finding the organizations, particularly the small nonprofits, as I said in the beginning, who don't have the big budget to do big marketing and get their name out there, to finding the organizations in the local community that are doing incredible work that align with your personal philanthropic goals. So, yeah, I think if you are stuck on wanting to take your giving to the next level, or wanting to have more impact, or wanting to be more strategic and focused, whatever your thing that you're stuck on, consider hiring a philanthropy advisor, because I think they can help you with giving in a way that aligns with your skills and your interests. And they can also help with driving more impact than just generic grant making.
Yeah, I think it answers the question of I have a passion about making an impact and I want to see ROI in XYZ passion of mine. And that philanthropic advisor can really help you find those. And you were talking before about digging through 1090s or not, I'm sorry, 990s, right? I'm still in tax mode, right? And all those things. A philanthropic advisor can really
do that for you.
Yeah. That, right.
Yeah.
And then you're not stuck with the, hey, Dave, where should I get my money? And you get my 3 answers.
Yeah.
Right? Or Jessica's 3 answers.
I get that like most people don't want to look at a 990, but I just threw that out there in case someone was like, I'm really passionate about this one organization. And I just want to see what they've been doing over the past couple of years and where things are trending. That's a very powerful form and it is publicly available.
Yeah, it is. But some people either don't want to or don't have the time to. I mean, I can cut my own grass and I don't do it.
Exactly.
So, it's time utilization. So that's really great. Thank you all for listening. I hope what Jessica and I talked about today gives you some clarity and confidence to take your next step with donating intentionally and in ways that help you make life option rich. Reach out to us if we can provide any more resources to you on this topic or anything else. And frankly, if you want even more excitement like this, you can subscribe to our newsletter at monumentwealthmanagement.com and then that / the word subscribe, or you can just go to the Monument website and hunt around. You'll find it there. But here's why it's worth it. Okay, first, you'll get access to our private YouTube playlist, which is full of videos that are not publicly available. We talk about topics like this, other topics. There's a lot of stuff in there that's really interesting. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, you automatically get access to that private YouTube playlist. And in addition, you'll see videos there with the investment management team where we talk about investment-related topics as bonus episodes in that playlist as well. Remember, these videos are only available to people who sign up for the newsletter, so make sure you get in there, get subscribed, and get access to these great videos. So again, that's monumentwealthmanagement.com and then / subscribe. Or go to the website and poke around. You can find it there. But that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Off the Wall, and we'll see you on the next one.
The previous presentation by Monument Capital Management LLC was intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the presentation serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from Monument or any other investment professional of your choosing. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk. It should not be assumed that the future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy or any non-investment related planning services, discussion, or content will be profitable, be suitable for your portfolio or individual situation, or prove successful. Neither Monument's investment advisor registration status, nor any amount of prior experience or success should be construed that a certain level of results or satisfaction will be achieved if Monument is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advice services. Monument is neither a law firm nor an accounting firm. No portion of its services should be construed as legal or accounting advice. No portion of the video content will be construed by a client or prospective client as a guarantee that he or she will experience a certain level of results if Monument is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. A copy of Monument's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request at www.monumentwealthmanagement.com.